Damien Cooley, welcome to Property Insights, mate.
Thanks for having me again, Mark.
Again. And I actually saw you a couple of weeks ago. I have to say, this guy right here, the best auctioneer in the country, at least in New South Wales. Definitely the best I've ever met. And I did it firsthand because he auctioned something for my brother and my sister and I recently. And I have to say, he did a brilliant job. Now, whether or not, I don't think there's any more money left on the table for him to get. Whether or not he got them to pay us more than they were prepared to pay, obviously not, because they paid it. We've settled. They've settled.
Settled already?
Settled already. They really wanted to move in.
Wow.
Because they were renting a place and they didn't want to have to do stuff with their furniture or leave and stuff like that. But then a lovely couple.
I think also, Mark, a good example of good quality real estate sells well in any market.
Yeah, but I do know what the bids were prior to the auction day, and you achieved substantially more than that. So anyway, thanks very much, Peter.
My pleasure.
You are very good at what you do. Let me just ask you, first and foremost, I read this weekend, so we're in the middle of August, I read this weekend that clearance rates were down.
Yep.
Now, we sold in June, end of June, or towards the end of June. What's going on? Is the market sort of starting to clear less?
So last time we spoke about the fact that we have our Cooley index. We track the numbers, clearance rates, average number of registered bidders, how many properties sell over reserve. Almost every single statistic in July was down on the previous month, which was in June.
Right. What about, would it be down on July relative to July last year?
Yeah. So if you look at the July numbers for last year, same time last year, our average volume was down. You're looking at June. I've got you there. Right. Clearance rate is slightly down. The average sold over reserve is slightly down. The average number of registered bidders is slightly down. Is it making a huge impact on the market? No. The numbers are quite small in the sense of how much they're down by, but the market is definitely not as good as it was in June. But I think it would also be fair to say that there hasn't been as many good quality properties on the market in July that there were in June.
So, and where do people get the Cooley Index from?
They can just jump on our website and subscribe. It's really easy.
Website details?
www.cooley.com.au.
And there's an index on it. Do they have to register to get this all the time, or they just
you can jump on the website and get it every month if you want to, or you can subscribe to it and we'll email it to you every month, totally up to the user.
Awesome. And I think I'll be doing that. So in terms of, you're not noticing much change in July 2024 relative to July 2023, and a little bit of change relative to June 2024. Is July ordinarily a seasonal change month anyway, amid school holidays?
Yeah, you've got a lot of things happening in the month of July. School holidays is a big impact because those people who have big family homes or more house type product, they're generally not selling in July. There's a lot of agents that are away on holidays and they're all back now and they're starting to list their properties. They're coming onto the market. So traditionally we find August to be a slow auction month because these are properties that came on in July.
Right.
There's a lot more properties starting to come onto the market now. So if you're an active buyer in the market right now and you've got your email searches on all the portals, you're starting to see a lot more emails coming in your inbox about this has just been listed, this has just been listed, and that's going to continue now right through spring.
It's funny, I am actually getting a bit more stuff. Shannon Whitney's sending me stuff left, right and centre. Not him, it's coming off an automatic system. But
he's a good agent, Shannon.
Yeah, and it's coming to me all over the place because I'm quite interested in this area around here and he's big in this particular area, but I'm starting to get weird stuff from all over the place where he's got his other offices because he's got offices everywhere, Bressy Whitney.
Give him your details, you're on the database.
What's going on? But I'm getting much pinged a lot more.
Yep.
A lot more. Someone asked me yesterday. I was doing a speech down in Melbourne, and someone asked me yesterday, "What do I think about property prices?" And I said, "I have no idea." So I'm going to ask you, what do you think about property prices? Now that's a broad question. I'm not talking about all of Australia. Let's just talk about Sydney. Let's not talk about apartments for a moment. Let's talk about houses first. and even Sydney's a pretty big question because you've got south, north, east, west, inner. But just generally, give us a bit of a view what you think is going on.
We're in a pretty good position in Sydney, and whether you're in the south or whether you're in the north or whether you're in the east, inner west, I think house market will remain pretty strong for quite some time. Can't see that really coming off too much, in the short term. Everything depends on the ability to borrow money, confidence in the market, government policy. The reality is if you're looking at buying a house in Sydney, in the greater Sydney suburbs, there's lots of other people who are also looking to buy a house in Sydney, and there just ain't enough houses.
And you're going to have competition.
So we keep getting told. So if there's lots of competition and there's not as much property on the market, prices will continue to rise. I just got back from a High Achievers event over in New Zealand, and we had agents from all around the country for a group from a company called The Agency. And some of the
that's one of the real estate agents in Sydney.
Real estate agents in Sydney, yeah. Well, actually a national business.
Right.
And they had agents from Victoria, from Brisbane, and from WA, and all around the country. And I actually asked that very question of a few of them. Brisbane, there's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of confidence in the market continuing. There is an extreme amount of confidence in the Perth market over in WA. Some of the agents that I spoke to recently were suggesting, potentially that the market might even double within the next 2 to 4 years.
Wow.
You're still buying 2-bedroom units over there for like $300,000-$400,000. Agents are going into listings over there where they need to have 2 to 4 buyers ready to go. Otherwise, the vendor's going to give it to somebody else. So there's lots of activity over in Perth.
What do they give you a reason for that? Is it people moving to Perth for some reason, or is it because it's cheaper? What is it?
They've been telling me there's a lot of Sydney investors coming over into the Perth market where they're investing in Perth, but they're renting in Sydney.
Right.
So there's a little bit of that going on. Melbourne's been lagging all the other states for quite some time. And, there's a few things maybe that people are fed up with government. Maybe there's a few taxation policies that have
the land tax policy
slowed things down. But if I'm an investor and looking outside of Sydney, maybe Melbourne's a good opportunity. Perth definitely is because Melbourne's been lagging for quite some time. Sydney market still remains strong. I mean, we've still got clearance rates in the early 60s. In the eastern suburbs, at 70%. We're still averaging, 4 bidders or around that number, be it a little bit more, a little bit less, about amount of people who are competing for properties. And if you have a good house or a good apartment, it's going to sell well in this market right now.
So if I now look at, let's just take Sydney and I go, okay, let's talk about bands. So let's say anything up to $1.5 million, anything, let's put in 3 bands, $1.5 million to say 4, and then 4 to and above. Is one of those areas not competing very well? In other words, is any one of those areas struggling a little bit?
There's not a lot of investors who are looking at buying apartments in Sydney right now. Most of the people who are buying apartments are first home buyers. That market remains very strong. People who are looking at spending, around the $4 million mark, I think that market, if anything, is maybe not as strong as the market that's 10 million plus. The people who are looking at buying, these assets for 20, 30, 80, $100 million, you'll be amazed how many buyers there are
really
for these properties and, all paying cash.
So they can't borrow that.
Well, not all of them.
Well, we won't lend it to you.
Most of them, are just buying them. So the market is good. We're actually in a really good position. If the conversation around interest rates remains that they'll either be steady or potentially coming down, that's a positive thing for Sydney house prices. And after reading, a lot of articles over the weekend and listening to your commentary around that, it seems likely that either rates are going to stay on hold or come down at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's fingers crossed that's the case.
Do you, as an agent and as an auctioneer, and you talk to agents all the time, do vendors, when they're putting properties on the market and also purchasers, do they actually get caught up in the big RBA, Reserve Bank of Australia conversation, like the media would have us believe? I mean, like yesterday in the Fin Review, the day after the RBA met for the month of August, I counted there was 16 pages dedicated in aggregate to the interest rate decision, which was no decision. It was a decision to do nothing, but the 16 pages dedicated to it. But are purchasers and or vendors really that wedded to this stuff?
Mark, I think right now they are. I own real estate myself. And I know that I do pretty well for myself in my business. I make a reasonable amount of money. I've got 3 kids at private school, which is a big investment in their education. And I've got a couple of properties that I have that I'm paying mortgages on. And even myself, I was thinking, far out, if interest rates go up again, things are starting to get pretty tight.
Yep.
And I think that conversation is on the dining room tables of lots of families,
right
across the nation. And I do think that it makes a difference. And we see change in the auction room when we have rate rises. We see the conversation from some purchasers saying, no, we think the market's going to start coming back.
So they actually say that?
They actually use those words. Now, all of us couldn't have been more wrong. When the rate started going up, we all probably thought the market was going to start coming back.
Everybody
did the total opposite, right? We all shit ourselves in COVID and we thought the market was going to tank. The market boomed. So it's very difficult to make a prediction right now on how the market's going to perform. But I think it would be reasonable to expect that, people are starting to struggle a little bit with mortgage repayments, and the conversation is prevalent in everybody's family homes and in the auction room. And we're certainly seeing buyers have that conversation with agents. Absolutely.
So when you were there, when you're auctioning a property, and of course, you are the penultimate, or the ultimate, I should say, psychologist, you're looking at people's body language and you're looking for their tell. I don't know if that's true or not, but it looks like that to me, because I've actually witnessed it. And you're trying to bring them along, but then you're trying to put pressure on them. Then you're trying to take the pressure off them. Do you experience them having conversations with their partner or their parents or whatever the case may be about how much they can afford?
Yeah, absolutely, all the time. Look, the bank of mum and dad are always encouraging them to bid more, and they're always tipping in to help out. That's absolutely happens at a lot of our auctions. I often find that single young people who are at the property, who are bidding on their own, they're more the skeptical ones of where the market's going.
Maybe more likely to miss out.
Absolutely more likely to miss out. I mean, my attitude is, if you find the right property, you like it, you can afford to buy it, don't worry about it, just buy it. Some might say that's the wrong attitude, but it's served well, throughout the country over decades.
There's no point trying to outguess the market.
Correct.
You would never do it.
Absolutely.
I guess it must be like a gift when you see a young couple walk in with their parents. You must automatically think, particularly, you might suss the parents out. You must be thinking to yourself, there's a buyer. I
have situations where the kids are bidding, and then it gets to a point where they've obviously reached their limit. Mum and dad may have helped out and given them a couple of bids, and the kids are actually telling mum and dad to stop, or whoever it is that's helping them stop, and then dad just takes over and keeps going. That happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
That's mad.
But I think that, our parents have been through cycles and they've seen what prices have done for quite some time. And markets will always come up and they'll come back a bit, and they'll come up again and they'll come back a bit. So if you're buying for the long term, I'm not worrying about whether the market's up or down at the point. I'm worrying about what I want to buy, where I want to invest, or where I want to live, and can I afford to be there?
So would you say then the premises should be, one, I like the joint, it ticks all the boxes, or most of the boxes. I can afford to make the repayments and I've got the loan approved at this price. And so these are necessary conditions. And finally, I'm not buying it to flip it. I'm buying it for on a 10-year basis, or even a longer term if possible. It doesn't matter whether it's investment or owner-occupier. Don't look at it as a short-term thing, and therefore you don't have to worry about the short-term ructions in the marketplace.
Yeah,
ups or downs, share market problems, whatever. Don't worry about that stuff, because you're sort of building a portfolio, and a portfolio approach means that a portfolio approach is different to the way a speculator works.
Absolutely. Portfolio approach, you're not selling.
You're not selling.
So you're just getting into the market.
Yeah.
And you get in as many times as you can.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And you don't respond to a volatility. And by the way, the Australian property market hasn't been that volatile, even with COVID. It just seems like, I don't want to say this, it sounds really bad, I might get criticised for saying this, but it nearly looks bulletproof over time. it's one of those asset classes you tend not to lose money. Although, we were just having a conversation with someone a few minutes ago who did say they got out of the market because that comes about as when you overcapitalise.
Yep, and that happens. I don't think a bullet has penetrated. So I think your comment is absolutely spot on. I think your comment about investing is spot on. I think people who look at building portfolios, when you're a young investor, you want to go and buy a 1 or 2 bedroom unit in Surrey Hills, then you might go and buy a terrace in Newtown, then you might go and buy a terrace in Paddington, for example. You might end up buying a house in the Lower North Shore or the Inner West or the Western Suburbs. You've invested in these different places, and the goal might be, you might try and keep all of them and rent a house or buy a house that you want to live in, the suburb you want to live in. Or you might say, you know what, I'm going to sell 2 of those to help me buy the bigger home. When you get to the point of a significant portfolio, you might say, I'm going to start selling these individual assets and I'm going to buy that block of units, or I'm going to go and buy that shop top housing, or I'm going to buy this commercial asset or industrial property. And I think that as you change and filter your way through residential versus different asset classes, from an investor's point of view, that's where things really start to get exciting, in my opinion.
So you talk to lots of people. And I know you don't. I don't know. Do you auction in Brisbane and Melbourne, places like that?
We do some auctions over in those states.
But you talk to agents from these places, and you go along to these events. You talk to agents. You mentioned you talked to agents from Perth recently.
Yep.
Are there any places in Australia that you think have perhaps greater potential than Sydney right now? I mean, we got the Brisbane and we got the 2032 Olympics coming up. There seems to be just the weather up there is better. It's not as crowded as Sydney. I mean, it's just something about Brisbane that sort of gets my interest, and the Gold Coast.
Yep.
By the way, at the moment, I never would have said about the Gold Coast 5-10 years ago, but these days I do say about the Gold Coast. Are there areas, other places outside of Sydney that you personally think have some?
Well, Brisbane's the obvious one for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Accessibility from Sydney is also really good because it's a short flight to Brisbane or onto the Gold Coast. But one of the exciting parts, and honestly, after speaking to a lot of these agents over in Perth, and these are guys that are doing between 100 transactions, 200 transactions a year. One agent, Arash, that I spoke to, who works for the agency over there, this guy's doing 380 transactions a year. Okay, so
that's one a day.
They know what they're talking about. And if they're excited about the market, I think there is a lot to be excited about the market over there. I think one thing that holds us back thinking about Perth is that living in Sydney, we're so far away from it. But when you're immersed in that state and you live there and you live and breathe it, you can see the opportunity because the average sale price is so much lower than what we know here in Sydney. So affordability becomes a big thing, Mark. And if you just can't afford to live in Sydney, you've got to look elsewhere. And to be frank, Brisbane's catching up. Brisbane's really catching up to Sydney. Melbourne's lagging, as I said, for all those reasons. But for me as an investor, I like the resilience of the Sydney market. I like to feel and touch where my money is. There's something about being able to drive past and go, oh, I own that unit or I own that terrace. Maybe that's a little bit short-sighted of me, but being able to know what it is that you have, I think it's a good thing.
Well, one of the things I've always said is if it's more than an hour away, I should own it. So Brisbane's only an hour away, so I guess it's not too bad. Gold Coast's only an hour away. Perth, but I used to live in Perth. I had an apartment in Perth 35 years ago.
Didn't do much for a long time.
It did not. It didn't. In fact, what I paid for it is what I sold it for. I lived there for about 4 or 5 years. I can't remember now, 5 years. I don't think I made much money on it, but it was fun owning a place there. But I understand the mathematics of the dynamics of the mathematics between Sydney people and Melbourne people and Adelaide people perhaps buying in Perth because you've got there's land tax advantages, spreading your risk. Perth economically is the only state that has a surplus. West Australia is the only state that has a surplus, an economic surplus, because of all the royalties they get from all the mining companies. Perth does not have anywhere near the congestion that the 3 major cities on the East Coast have. Perth's a bit of has the lowest vacancy rate, has lowest unemployment in Australia, apart from Canberra. But Canberra's obvious, they all work for the government. There's a lot of data points that make Perth, now you've mentioned to me, that make Perth sound to me to be a very good alternative for diversification in a portfolio basis.
Yep.
And I can see why people are, and I reckon Adelaide's doing that, because we have an office in Perth that's not very big, but we have a few offices in Adelaide. Our Adelaide branch for Yellowbrick Road, by transaction number, is the biggest office in the country.
Yep.
We do more transactions out of our Adelaide Brighton office, which is an area called Brighton, than we do in any other office in Australia. And that includes all our aggregator brokers too, which got 1,200 so around the country. So, and Adelaide is, and they tell me the reason why, Damien, is that they get people just ringing up online and buying properties, and they can borrow. The average house, you can buy a house over $600,000.
That's it. They're buying them sight unseen. And you take Perth, for example, in the same example I spoke about earlier. If you're buying that 2-bedroom unit for $400,000, I think they're renting them out for like $500-600 a week.
Yeah.
Whereas in Sydney, you go and buy a 2-bedroom unit in Coogee for 1.3 million, you're getting $700-800 a week.
So you're getting like 2 or 3% return. Over there, you're getting 6 or 7% return.
Yeah.
And that pays a mortgage.
Absolutely. The exciting thing about the Sydney market, as I said, is that you can drive past, you own it. There's something really nice about that. They're not making any more landmark in Bondi, Coogee, Maroubra, Clovelly, Bronte. If you go into Vaucluse, Rose Bay, Bellevue Hill, Bellevue Hill I reckon is one of the best markets in the whole of the eastern suburbs. They're not making any more land in those areas. There's only one way that real estate's going to go in those markets, and that's up. Whether it be a fast trajectory, a medium trajectory, it is going up.
I feel like I'm going to make a bid. I heard you say that at a Mossman auction recently. You said there's not going to be many more houses like this come on the market. Federation House, you went through the whole series, north-facing backyard, garage, everything like that.
Yep.
And I thought, yeah, he's right. and I was the vendor. Maybe I shouldn't sell. That was going through my mind.
Once I was doing an auction and I was calling it quickly and I was pretending I was going to sell it, and the owner shouted out, "Don't sell it."
No.
I was like, I'm not going to sell it. It's okay. It's a bit of auctioneer trickery. I'm just trying to get them to bid.
Well, Damien Cooley, thanks very much again for your insights. I have to say, I want to thank you for what you did for my family more recently. It was brilliant. And but your insights that we share with our audience is really important to us. So once again, thanks very much, mate.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mark.